And we're live. Welcome everyone to another live with your host, me, Christopher Balkaran. Folks, I am telling you, this is the place where we can have honest and straightforward conversations about what's happening in Canada. So many of you have been reaching out to me saying, keep up what you're doing. And I'm telling you, the only reason I'm keeping up with what I'm doing is because of everyone that's reaching out and telling me to do so. So keep telling me what you want to see. And again, the reason why I do all of this is because there are so many conversations that I think our government, our media, just they're choosing not to talk about, and I think for very specific reason. Because when we talk about temporary foreign workers, when we talk about youth unemployment, when we talk about the number of jobs that have been created in Canada, it paints a very bleak picture, but a picture that is purposely not being told. And there are data pieces that Statistics Canada is not keeping track of. Now, some may say it's because they're strapped, they don't have enough people working there, they're under tight deadlines, and et cetera, et cetera. But let me tell you something, folks. I really do believe there are data pieces that StatsCan purposely does not collect. Because if they were to collect it, the narrative would very much shift. And the story may be very compelling as to what is truly going on. Sorry, my camera is going in and out of focus. But if you're liking my content, if you're liking these conversations, folks, hit that like button, subscribe, share, tell all your friends. Again, nowhere on the internet is there more and more honest conversations about what's going on in Canada, because of everything that's going on. Now, I will say I have a whole script for what I'm going to cover tonight on temporary foreign workers, international students, number of jobs created, and where I think the right and the left agree. Before I do, just before I hit live, a few hours ago, Stéphane Guilbeault, renowned minister under Justin Trudeau, has resigned from cabinet. I think he's going to stay on. Very interesting times here for the Liberal Party of Canada under Mark Carney, who I've said in previous videos, he's shifted the needle to the right for the Liberals on many, many topics. He's not the feminist prime minister. He's not out there scolding the world on feminism, LGBTQ rights. I don't think I've ever really heard him talk about LGBTQ rights at all. And for many Liberals who had staked their claim and their livelihood to a large part due to identity politics, concerns about the environment, etc., this might be too much for them, too much change for them to accept. Stéphane Guilbeault, I think, is falling into that camp. He has been minister for a long time, but under Mark Carney, there's a very different approach Canada is taking to climate change, as I see it. I think that it's probably for the better, as general sentiment to many of Trudeau's climate policies were not very well received. So I anticipate that Mark Carney had known this, and he was probably looking for a way to get rid of Stéphane Guilbeault, because he wants to usher in a very unique brand, a very Mark Carney brand. And there's probably going to be more resignations from Trudeau's cabinet members under Mark Carney. And I think for good reason. I think this is a very different party than it was was it last year under Justin Trudeau? Okay, that out of the way. Here's a topic Mark Carney doesn't want to talk about, and maybe he should start talking about. The number of temporary foreign workers has exploded, as I've discussed, and youth unemployment still remains very high. So let me share with you folks the graph that I shared yesterday on my Instagram and on YouTube Shorts. There's many, but let's start here. This is the graph: total non-permanent residents from 2010 to 2025. I'm just going to leave this up on screen. You can see it for yourself. We were less than 1 million in 2010. We were at 500,000 in 2010. Um, a condo price in downtown Toronto was around 200,000 in 2010. And today, well, you can see it for yourself, folks, especially after 2020, 2021 in particular, massive increase. So, folks, total non-permanent residents. This includes temporary foreign workers, non-permanent residents, uh, international students, foreign workers on a work visa, all of them, study permit holders, international students. Look at that. From 535,000 in 2010 to over 3 million by 2025. Some say that number is actually underrepresented, but these are the stats from Statistics Canada. Now, you might be looking at this graph and saying to yourself, well, Christopher, of course, our economy is growing. We need more temporary foreign workers. No question. This represents, in a 15-year period, a 465% increase in temporary foreign workers. 465%. I'm just going to let that stat settle there with you for 1 second. I want you to think about that, because the rest of this live will be looking at that in relation to many other topics. 465%, folks. I couldn't make it up even if I tried. And this represents the biggest shift population-wise in Canada's history. Again, one of the biggest shifts, I think the biggest shift in Canada's history has been over the past 15 years in terms of temporary foreign workers coming to Canada. Now, a lot of people have been saying this is xenophobia, this is racism, this is stereotyping. No, that's not. None of that is what what is happening here. This is about right or left, everyone understanding Canada by its own policy making through the temporary foreign worker program and the international mobility program under the global skills strategy that was introduced by Stephen Harper. This is a by design. Again, I'm going to get this graph up again for you, but this is by design. This is not, nice to have. This is by design. The government wanted to increase temporary foreign workers, especially international students. And let me read out some stats for you so that everyone gets this number. 2010, we had 200,000 international students. 2023, 1.037 million. That's about a 400% increase. Work permit holders went from 400,000 to 1.55 million, about a 286% increase. Now, I just want to mention the number of international students and temporary work permit holders. Guess what? Guess what, folks? They are all competing for the same jobs as our young people in retail, in food service, in hospitality, in trucking, in childcare, in customer service, in the gig work, in administration, in call centers, in low to mid skill services. Just look at that. You've got 3 million people today competing. I keep sharing this graph. I'll stop now. Competing for the same jobs as young Canadians. I'm going to throw up another graph so that we can really hammer this point home, because I think it's so important that we talk about this in relation to what's happening. Now, I do this again with the utmost of care. These are such important stats that we all talk about. But this is something I feel very passionate about. So here's one thing I want to share with you. Now, I want you to look at this graph, but I want you to remove 2019 to 2020 because that was an anomaly. These are the net jobs created and lost over year from 2010 to 2025. So the zero line is anything above it are the jobs that Canada created or were created in Canada. And the line below, obviously during COVID, we lost over 500,000 jobs. Again, that was obviously very temporary. But again, I'm just going to break this down for you. In 2010, we had about 17 million Canadians employed. By 2025, 21 million. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, that's all Canadians. That story is not accurate. So if you stop right here, you remove 2020, you think Canada is a job creating, stable economy, massive machine where the next generation and subsequent generations are going to thrive. Um, it's it's pretty wild to see this in a graph that we've created so many jobs. And you can see the spike in 2014 to 2015. Again, it was on an upward trajectory and then it went down because of COVID. But, again, if you remove 2020, look at 2021, like over 500,000. Yes, it came down, but again, we're on an upward trajectory. So since 2010, we have created over 4 million jobs. 4 million jobs in Canada. Again, I'm going to let that number sink in. 4 million. We've let in 3 million in the previous graph that I shared to the nth degree. And we created as a society, as a country, 4 million jobs. 4 million. 4 million jobs. Now, I've gone down this rabbit hole before with some of you. And what the heck? Let me do that again. I want to just mention something that I've been thinking about. And I've been thinking about this for a while. And some of the research supports it, some doesn't. So I'm still on the fence of being so forceful with it. So let me just say this. 2014, 2015, we see a few things happen all at the same time. Uber, Amazon, Skip the Dishes, all the food service delivery apps come to Canada. I think 2013, 2014 are the years they start getting introduced. They start getting introduced at a time, of course, when our phones can also take on more apps, more data. The internet mobility services are getting much better. I think we're still around 4G at that time, and they're getting much better. They're getting more faster, lower latency. All that to say, these are the early days of food service delivery. At the same time this is happening, as I've shown in our graphs here, temporary foreign workers, international students are growing exponentially. It's not growing like a few percentage points year over year. By 2014-15, they're growing quite dramatically. So we have Uber and Amazon and all these things coming to Canada. At the same time, our phones and internet services are getting better. At the same time, temporary foreign workers are coming into Canada in higher and higher numbers. I don't know about you, but that seems like kind of a plan, because I say this again, tinfoil hat on. Why would hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers suddenly come to Canada with like no job prospects? There has to be a job prospect in Canada. And instantaneously, as Uber, Amazon, and all these companies come to Canada, they're instantly staffed by temporary foreign workers. I don't remember there ever being a transition period. Instantly overnight. Instantly. And I think that these large companies expand into countries where they know that the immigration system is set up so that their companies get a steady supply of laborers that will work those hours. Now, the flip side to this is that if there wasn't an immigration system set up, now, before I get to the flip side, you might be saying to yourself, Christopher, that seems very out there. Well, Canada just the other day announced temporary visas to support the FIFA 2026 games here in Canada. So temporary visas are going to be set up to facilitate those coming from all around the world to Canada. Because if they were to go through the typical processes here, it would take some time. So Canada is setting up a special visa for this exact event that's happening in Canada. Now, of course, this was determined well in advance of Canada signing on to FIFA in 2026. There must have been some consideration, otherwise, the FIFA executives would have not chosen Canada. So, all that to say, the temporary foreign worker visas and other things that allow people to work in Canada must have been facilitated for the expansion of Uber, Amazon, and other on demand food service delivery industries. The gig economy, when you think about it, really started during this time, the Uber drivers, etc. So, again, my thinking here is these companies had to have made sure that there was an immigration pipeline for them to have find their workers to work on their platforms. Because if there wasn't, if Canada really kicked up a fuss and said, no, they have to be economic immigrants, they have to go through the system, and that's the only way they're coming to Canada. I don't think these companies would expand into Canada. I don't think that these companies would expand and flourish in Canada. I think that they would be like, well, it's very hard to get into Canada through the legal means, and the government seems unwilling to provide a pathway for immigrants from around the world to come on a temporary basis. So we're not really going to do business with them. I kind of see that happening. Like to me, that makes the most amount of sense because many people have said the same thing. If the gig economy, if Uber and Amazon came to Canada and they only hired Canadians, well, Canadians would only work 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day. Canadians would take time off. They'd go for their breaks. They'd make sure that they're going to bed at night. They wouldn't work late hours without compensation, obviously, for it. What I'm hearing from temporary foreign workers in interviews online and also from people who have worked with them, the amount of exploitation that temporary foreign workers are facing, long hours, no pay, it's out of this world. What Canadian would sign up for that job, right? And I think that these, execs in Uber and Amazon may actually know about it and may not be, addressing it in a very meaningful way. Maybe, just maybe, who knows, right? And so when you start thinking about it from that lens, you start realizing that special access and special privilege can be given to make sure that temporary foreign workers come to Canada in as efficient way as possible. I say all of this because the global skills strategy started in 2011. I mean, it was thought about before, but then it exploded in the 2014, 2015, 2016, 20, like it really took off. And under Justin Trudeau, there were pathways for temporary foreign workers, international students, to permanent residency and citizenship. So you didn't have to be an economic immigrant to get citizenship. I think Canadians are generally okay with temporary foreign workers to a certain level. The levels that we have are just through the roof in the past few years. But also, I think Canadians would be surprised and shocked to know that there are pathways to citizenship for temporary foreign workers, for international students. I think Canadians are quite happy with the economic immigration system that we have that allows in a few 100,000 because it's a point system. You have to show academics, you have to show money in the bank account. It's how my parents got here. It's how so many immigrants from the 80s, 90s, and even earlier came to Canada through the economic immigration strategy. And it's still going on to this day. But this temporary foreign worker system just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to Canadians. We've let in millions under these programs, no labor market checks, no indication if they have jobs, and there's a lot of employer abuse to them as well because a lot of them just don't know their rights. So I've talked to you about the number of jobs created, the number of temporary foreign workers who are entering this country. Here's the thing that, again, nobody really wants to talk about, but we're going to talk about here tonight, guys, because it's too important, damn it. Here we go. Check this out. Total youth unemployment during this time. Folks, you can probably guess by now, I nerd out about government data. Someone's got to nerd out about it, damn it, and that's going to be me. I actually went on to StatsCan and got the youth unemployment rates from 2010 to 2025, and I just got the Excel data and said, "Make me a chart." It's really not that hard when you get the data. But you can see in 2010, the total youth unemployment was around 15%. For some reason, the youth are like 15 to 19, 20 to 24. It's weird how they map it out like that. But anyways, 15 to 24 is generally it. It starts around 15% in 2010. 15 years later, we see it slightly go down. Massive spike under COVID. Again, please remove COVID. I mean, 2020 in many ways like is such an anomaly on all these charts now that like there has to be an asterisk obviously. But you can see from this graph that total unemployment amongst youth has remained relatively unchanged from 2010. 15 to 19-year-olds 20% in 2010, right now just under 20%. 15 to 24-year-olds around 15%. Oh, sorry. 20 to 24-year-olds around 11%, and today probably just under 11%. And so the average was around 15% in 2010, and today it's basically the same. Now, why do I share this? Like, what's the point in me sharing the total youth unemployment? It's because we created 4 million jobs. And we let in 3 million people competing for the same jobs as young people in Canada. So basically, no net new jobs were created for young people. And that's really upsetting when you think about it. Really upsetting. So this is the part, again, I just don't understand. And again, remember, 3 million temporary foreign workers, they're all working food service, retail, hospitality, childcare, trucking, customer service, gig work, admin, call centers, low to mid skill service roles, the same jobs young Canadians would get after university. And nobody wants to talk about it. Here's something that's also interesting. This is also so interesting because I think this is something that both the right and the left would agree on. The quiet collapse of union jobs. Did you know that unionization rates in Canada have gone from 38% in the 80s to around the 20%, 25, high 20%? I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but in certain industries, union presence is down by like 60%. So there is a decline in unionized jobs here in Canada. Now, the next analysis for me is to map out the number of unionized jobs, what sectors, and why. Now, this is where I think the left would agree with me on. You know, the left, I don't know, agrees with everything that I say, but check this out. The other month, I was talking to my Uber driver, and he told me that he had been on the road by that point. It was late at night. That point, he was on the road for about 14 hours. And that he takes no days off. He works 7 days a week, and this is what he does. And so I said to him, I said, like, I don't know if this is a good thing for you. And he said, why? And I said, well, like anything, if you stay focused, your brain can only stay focused for a certain amount of time. And if you're not, like getting rest, especially deep sleep, the other day I was listening to a podcast and the host was saying, deep sleep is so important to rejuvenate our entire body, to let the mind decompress and get rid of a lot of junk and, purge the mind basically. And so if you're not getting deep sleep, like not just regular sleep, but like really deep sleep, the mind doesn't have the opportunity to purge that information. And so you can become more sick, your cells don't get to replenish as much, da, da, da. So all that to say, and I'm not saying this for all, But I have noticed amongst, like, Uber drivers and Uber Eats guys on the bikes and on the cars, like, they're very short-tempered, and they're very aggressive, and you think, like, who can blame them? They've been on the road for 14 hours, 13 hours. Maybe not the guys on the bike as much, but the guys behind the car might be 13, 14 hours. They may not even know that their body needs rest because 'cause they're hustling so hard. And here's the thing, I feel like no one's telling them that this whole system is just like it's really like, a house of cards here. Like, there should be some conversation about that. I don't know if they know that. So, as you can see from the data, we've created millions of jobs, we've allowed millions in, and our youth unemployment still remains very high. And there's a lower number of jobs that are now unionized. All of this tells me that this is a plan that the government enacted in maybe the early 2000s with the intention of it being, starting in the 2010s. And it's gone off the rails. And I think they're relying on Canadians to not know about the madness that's happening. But it's so important that we talk about this, um, just so that we can keep this conversation going. Because Stats Canada is not keeping any data on the unemployment rates for temporary foreign workers, international students. That's by design. Because if we were to show that number, if I were to actually find that number of unemployment rates amongst temporary foreign workers and then compare them to young people in Canada, it would be night and day. Because I guarantee you that the unemployment number of temporary foreign workers is 0 to 1% at most. Now, I'm not saying that these are great jobs that everybody would wanna wake up to, but what I am saying is that jobs were created and young Canadians were not part of the discussion. They were completely left out, which is why young Canadians today are almost 1 in 5 young people today do not have a job. Just think about that. 1 in 5. 1 in 5 young people today do not have a job. And then we can go a step further and connect this to petty theft and crime and, I don't know if there's a correlation with teenage pregnancies or miscreant behavior or, just the list goes on and on. Um, it is a wild time. And some have asked what I think a solution is. And my solution comes back to the original intent of the temporary foreign worker program. Put the onus on the employer. The employer has to prove to the government that they can't hire a Canadian. I can't see how Tim Hortons can say with a straight face they can't hire a Canadian to throw coffee and pick up a donut and give it to somebody. Like, give me a break. No. The employer has to show clearly that they cannot hire a Canadian. And no games, no fun and games. Like, it's we have to protect Canadian jobs. What's the point of our citizenship if we can't even get jobs in the country that we are born or live in or are citizens to, and are not being prioritized over a temporary foreign worker? Help me understand that logic. In what country does that happen other than Canada? I don't know. But folks, I'm just hitting up 30 minutes. So if you haven't already, folks, like, share, subscribe. Folks, I'm also going to keep building out my Gumroad. Let me know some digital tools and products you want to see. Maybe I should map all of this out into a digital product. I'd love to know what you think about that. So like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell one friend. That's all I want. Just tell one friend about my channel. Send them my content, send them everything that I post. More Canadians need to be talking about this. So like, share, subscribe, comment below. Tell me what you think. I will definitely catch you in the next one, folks. Take care. Take care of each other, and we'll catch you next time. Have a great night, everyone. Bye for now.